Have you ever gotten behind the wheel of a car and immediately thought, this thing is trying to kill me? We're not talking about your typical finicky sports car or oversized SUV here. We're talking about American-made machines that are so ridiculously difficult to drive, they make parallel parking look like child's play. Today we're counting down 10 American cars that are so challenging to operate, they probably should have come with a warning label. Or, better yet, never left the factory floor. Before we dive into this automotive nightmare, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for number 1. Number 10, the Dodge Viper, ACR. The Dodge Viper ACR is what happens when engineers forget that humans need to actually drive their creations. This isn't just a car, it's a barely street-legal race machine that hates you. Released in 2008, the ACR took everything dangerous about the regular Viper and cranked it up to 11. No traction control, no stability management, no electronic nannies whatsoever. Just you, 600 horsepower, and a prayer. The clutch feels like you're leg pressing a refrigerator. The steering, heavier than a 1970s Buick at low speeds, then suddenly light as a feather when you don't want it to be. But here's where it gets really special. The ACR's massive rear tires, 345mm wide, mean the car tramlines like it's on rails, except those rails lead wherever the road imperfections want to take you. Hit a groove in the pavement, the car jerks violently in that direction, and you better have arms like a bodybuilder to wrestle it back. The ride quality is, well, there isn't any. The suspension is so stiff you can feel individual pebbles through the seat. Your spine becomes a seismograph for every road imperfection. Long trips? Forget it. Your kidneys will file for divorce after 20 minutes. The side pipes shoot out heat that could cook a steak, turning the cabin into a mobile sauna. The pedals are offset so far to the left that your right leg goes numb. The visibility? You might as well be driving with a paper bag over your head. Professional race car driver Randy Pubst once said driving the ACR on the street was like riding a barely tamed wild animal, and he's driven everything. The car set multiple track records, sure, but on public roads, it's a lawsuit waiting to happen. The ACR demands 100% of your attention 100% of the time. Look away for a second to change the radio station, assuming you can hear it over the engine noise. And you'll find yourself sideways in a ditch, or worse. Number 9, the Ford GT40. The original Ford GT40 from the 1960s wasn't designed for your morning commute. It was built for one thing, beating Ferrari at Le Mans, and it succeeded. But as a road car, it's about as practical as wearing a tuxedo to go swimming. This is a car that's only 40 inches tall. Hence, the name. Getting in requires the flexibility of a gymnast and the patience of a saint. First, you have to figure out how to open the door. It's not where you think it is, the handle is hidden in the roof. Once you solve that puzzle, you realize the door opens up and out, requiring about 6 feet of clearance. Park too close to anything and you're trapped. The seats don't adjust at all. Ford figured if you didn't fit, you shouldn't be driving it. The pedals are so close together you need ballet slippers instead of driving shoes. And the gear lever, it's connected directly to the transmission with all the mechanical sympathy of a sledgehammer. The view out, what view? The windshield is a mail slot. The side windows are portholes. Looking behind you? That's what faith is for. The engine sits right behind your head, screaming at 7,000 RPM. Conversation is impossible. Thinking is difficult. The cabin temperature regularly exceeds 120 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 120 written out, not an exaggeration. The racing fuel cell means you're sitting on 40 gallons of high-octane gasoline. Comforting, but here's the real party trick, the clutch. It's either fully engaged or fully disengaged. There's no slipping it gently like a normal car. Stop-and-go traffic becomes a series of violent jerks and stalls. Hill starts? You'll need 3 feet, one for the brake, one for the gas, and one for the clutch. The turning radius is measured in zip codes. U-turns require 3-point turns, sometimes 5-point turns. The ground clearance is so low that speed bumps become Everest. Driveways require careful planning and geometric calculations. Number 8, the 1987 Buick GNX. The Buick GNX looks like your grandmother's grocery getter. Black, boxy, unassuming. Until you hit the gas. Then it becomes a turbocharged missile with the handling characteristics of a shopping cart full of bowling balls. This was Buick's swan song for the G-body platform, and they decided to go out with a bang. A 276 horsepower bang. Doesn't sound like much today, but in 1987, this thing was faster than a Ferrari. The problem wasn't the power, it was everything else. The GNX had the aerodynamics of a brick and the weight distribution of a seesaw. All the weight sat over the front wheels. The rear might as well have been on ice skates. The turbo lag was measured with a calendar. Floor it, wait, boom. Suddenly you're sideways, wondering what happened. The boost came on like a light switch. No warning, no progression, just instant chaos. The steering was about as communicative as a mime with laryngitis. You turned the wheel and hoped the car would follow. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. The brakes were borrowed from much lesser Buicks and weren't remotely up to the task of stopping this black rocket. The rear drum brakes would fade faster than a cheap tattoo. After 2 hard stops, you were basically relying on prayer and engine braking. But the real killer was the suspension. GM's engineers somehow created a setup that was both too soft and too stiff simultaneously. It would wallow through corners like a drunk sailor, then suddenly snap into oversteer without warning. The live rear axle would hop and skip over bumps, each wheel doing its own thing. In the rain, forget it. The GNX turned into an unguided missile. Those skinny front tires and massive turbo torque meant wheel spin in the first 3 gears. On dry pavement, the all-black interior was a sea of cheap plastic that creaked and rattled. The digital dash would flicker and die randomly. The power seats would occasionally decide to adjust themselves. While you were driving, at speed, the GNX was fast, no doubt, but it was fast in the same way a rocket-powered shopping cart is fast, thrilling, terrifying, and probably going to end badly. Number 7. The Vector W8. The Vector W8 was supposed to be America's answer to Lamborghini. What we got instead was a 625 horsepower lesson in why cocaine and automotive design don't mix. This wasn't just difficult to drive, it was actively trying to hurt you. Everything about the W8 was excessive, starting with the price tag of $450,000 in 1990. Money. That's over $1 million in today's dollars. The interior looked like a fighter jet designed by someone who had never seen a fighter jet. Switches everywhere, none of them labeled. Want to adjust the mirrors? Good luck finding that switch among the 36 identical toggles. The digital displays would overheat and shut off. The air conditioning was theoretical at best. The doors weighed about 200 pounds each and required Schwarzenegger-level strength to open. Once inside, you realized the seats were apparently designed for aliens. No human spine could be comfortable, but the driving experience, oh boy. The twin-turbo V8 produced massive power with all the subtlety of a nuclear explosion. The turbos were enormous, which meant lag that could be measured in geological time. Nothing, then everything. The car would literally try to swap ends without warning. The clutch was heavier than a deadlift. The gearbox felt like stirring rocks with a pool cue. First gear was good for 70 miles per hour. 70. Try parking that. The handling handling implies some level of control. The W8 didn't handle, it just sort of happened. The weight distribution was all wrong. The suspension geometry was apparently designed by throwing darts at a board. The steering was simultaneously too heavy and too light. The brakes would work, sometimes, when they felt like it. The carbon fiber body panels would crack if you looked at them wrong. The build quality made kit cars look professionally assembled. Only 19 customer cars were ever built. Most spent more time being repaired than driven. One owner famously said it was like driving a hand grenade with the pin pulled. The company eventually went bankrupt, surprising absolutely no one. The Vector W8 remains a monument to ambition exceeding ability, and physics and common sense. Number 6. The SSC Ultimate Aero. The SSC Ultimate Aero held the title of world's fastest production car from 2007 to 2010. It could hit 256 miles per hour. The problem? It was about as refined as a caveman's club. This wasn't a supercar. It was a barely street-legal rocket with turn signals. The build quality made the Vector look like a Rolls-Royce. Panel gaps you could fit your hand through. Doors that sometimes opened, sometimes didn't. Windows that would fall into the doors randomly. Getting in required the flexibility of a yoga instructor and the patience of a kindergarten teacher. The doors opened at weird angles that defied physics. The seats were apparently designed by someone who hated humans. The driving position was wrong for anyone not exactly 6 feet tall. Too short? You couldn't see over the dashboard. Too tall? Your head hit the roof. The pedals were placed by a sadist. The dead pedal didn't exist. Your left foot just dangled uncomfortably. The twin-turbo V8 made 1,183 horsepower. That's not a typo. 1,183. in a car that weighed 2,900 pounds. With no traction control, no stability management, no electronic aids whatsoever. Just you and enough power to alter the Earth's rotation. The power delivery was like an on-off switch. Gentle throttle applications didn't exist. It was either idling or trying to achieve escape velocity. The handling at low speeds was agricultural. The steering was heavier than a 70s pickup truck. The turning radius was measured in football fields, but get it up to speed and everything reversed. The steering became twitchy. The front end would get light, very light, terrifyingly light. At 200 miles per hour, the car felt like it was floating, because it basically was. The aerodynamics were an afterthought. The car generated lift, not downforce, lift. At maximum speed, you were essentially piloting a ground effect aircraft. The clutch was brutal, the gearbox was worse. Finding gears was like solving a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. The throws were long and vague, the synchros gave up after about 1,000 miles. The cooling system was inadequate, the car would overheat in traffic. The air conditioning was a joke, the interior would reach oven temperatures. One journalist described driving it as wrestling an angry bear while solving calculus problems. He wasn't exaggerating. Number 5. The Mosler MT900S. The Mosler MT900S was what happened when a company decided that things like comfort and usability were for losers. This was a car designed with one goal: be the fastest thing at track days. The fact that it was street legal was more of a technicality than a feature. Warren Mosler's creation was essentially a Le Mans prototype with license plates, and about as practical as wearing a race suit to a wedding. First, let's talk about getting in. There weren't doors in any conventional sense. You had to remove the roof panel, climb over the side, then reattach the roof. In the rain, too bad. The weather protection consisted of hoping it didn't rain. The side windows, plastic panels you had to bolt in place. The windshield wiper, singular, one wiper, for a windshield the size of a letter slot. The interior made a prison cell look luxurious, 2 racing buckets. That's it. No radio, no air conditioning, no heat, no carpets. Just aluminum floors that would burn your feet through your shoes. The driving experience was pure violence. The Corvette-derived V8 made 435 horsepower in a car weighing 2,200 pounds. The power-to-weight ratio was insane. But here's the thing about lightweight cars. They're nervous, twitchy. The MT900S was like driving a caffeinated Chihuahua. Every input was magnified. Breathe on the steering wheel and you'd change lanes. The suspension was rock hard, not stiff, hard, like granite. Your spine became a shock absorber. The brakes were incredible, too incredible. They'd throw you through the windshield if you weren't careful. No ABS meant lockups were common. The pedal feel was like stepping on a brick. Modulation required the touch of a surgeon. The clutch was racing spec, which meant it was either engaged or it wasn't. No slipping, no feathering. Stop signs became launch control events. The gearbox was a sequential unit that required violence to operate. You didn't shift gears, you beat them into submission. But the real party piece was the complete lack of safety equipment. No airbags, no crumple zones, no side impact protection. The crash structure was your faith in not crashing. The fuel tank was right behind your head. The exhaust ran under the door sills, cooking your legs. One owner described it as driving a fuel bomb while sitting on a barbecue grill. Only about 3 dozen were ever made. Most owners quickly realized that street legal and street capable were very different things. Number 4, the Pneus Esperante GTR1. The Pneus Esperante GTR1 was technically a road car. Technically. In reality, it was a Le Mans race car that someone forgot to tell couldn't be sold to civilians. This wasn't just difficult to drive. It required a racing license just to start it properly. The GTR1 was Danny Pinoza's fever dream of creating the ultimate road-legal track weapon. What he created was a litigation magnet. The engine was a 6-liter V8 making 600 horsepower. Sounds reasonable until you realize the car weighed 2,200 pounds, and all that weight was in the rear. The front might as well have been empty. The weight distribution was 70% rear, 30% front. In the rain, the front tires were basically decorative. They'd aquaplane on morning dew. The steering was so light at speed you could turn it with your pinky, which was terrifying when the rear was trying to overtake the front. Getting in required removing the steering wheel. Yes, really, the wheel was detachable like a race car. Once inside, you realized why. There was no room. Your knees touched the dashboard, your elbows hit the doors. The pedals were so close together you needed racing boots, regular shoes. You'd hit all 3 pedals at once. The sequential gearbox was straight from the race car. No clutch for shifting, just bang through the gears, except it required perfect rev matching. get it wrong, and you'd lock the rear wheels at speed, without warning. The aerodynamics were interesting. The car generated so much downforce it could theoretically drive upside down at 150 miles per hour. Great for the track. On the road, the front splitter would scrape on everything. Paint lines, cigarette butts, harsh thoughts. The rear wing was so large it blocked rear visibility entirely. Not that it mattered. The side mirrors vibrated so much they were useless. The engine was so loud you couldn't hear emergency vehicles or your own thoughts. The cooling was designed for racing speeds. Below 50 miles per hour, the car would overheat. In traffic, you had about 10 minutes before things got critical. The carbon brakes needed heat to work. Cold, they were like stepping on a banana peel. Hot, they'd stop time itself. The transition between the two was exciting. The suspension had two settings, rock hard and harder. The ride quality made a skateboard feel luxurious. Panoz made exactly one road-going GTR1. The owner drove it twice and parked it permanently. Number 3, the Hennessy Venom GT. John Hennessy took a Lotus Elise and thought, this needs 1,200 horsepower. The result was the Venom GT, a car that made no sense whatsoever. This wasn't engineering, it was insanity with a price tag. The Venom GT was essentially a British sports car with an American nuclear reactor stuffed where the trunk should be. The weight distribution was approximately 100% wrong. The power delivery was biblical. The twin-turbo V8 made boost like a tsunami. Nothing happened below 3,000 RPM, then all 1,200 horsepower arrived instantly. The car would literally twist under acceleration. The chassis would flex visibly. You could watch the body panels move relative to each other. In a straight line, it was the fastest thing on Earth. It hit 270 miles per hour at the Kennedy Space Center. In corners, it was a disaster looking for a location. The steering was from the Lotus, designed for a car with 200 horsepower, not 1,200. It was like trying to control a rocket with a toy airplane controller. The feedback was overwhelming. Every pebble, every tar strip, every imperfection telegraphed directly to your hands. But when the rear stepped out, and it always stepped out, the steering couldn't keep up. You'd correct, overcorrect, then spin. The brakes were equally overwhelmed. They'd stop the car, once, maybe twice. Then they'd fade faster than a politician's promise. The traction was theoretical. First gear was good for 60 miles per hour of wheel spin. Second gear, more wheel spin. Third, still spinning. Fourth gear was where you could finally use full throttle. Maybe if it was perfectly dry and warm and you were brave or stupid. The line between brave and stupid in the Venom was very thin. The stability at high speed was terrifying. The car would dance around like it was on ice. The aerodynamics were an afterthought. The front would get light, the rear would squat. You were essentially driving a pendulum. The build quality was creative. Panels didn't fit. The interior was a mix of Lotus parts and hardware store solutions. The key would sometimes work, sometimes not. The windows would fall off their tracks, the doors wouldn't always latch. One owner reported his passenger door opening at 150 miles per hour. The air conditioning was overwhelmed by the engine heat. The transmission tunnel would literally burn you. The exhaust note was loud enough to set off car alarms 3 blocks away. Only 29 were made, most have been crashed. The survivors sit in collections, being admired, but not driven. Number 2, the Callaway Sledgehammer Corvette. In 1988, Reeves Callaway decided the Corvette wasn't fast enough. His solution, twin turbos making 898 horsepower. The result was the Sledgehammer, a car that could hit 254 miles per hour. In 1988, with 1988 technology, which means no electronic aids whatsoever. The Sledgehammer was proof that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. The engine was a work of art and terror. The twin turbos were massive. The lag was extraordinary. You'd floor it and nothing would happen. For seconds. Long seconds. Then both turbos would spool up simultaneously and try to fire you into orbit. The power delivery was like being rear-ended by a freight train, suddenly, without warning. While you were trying to merge onto the highway, the torque would twist the entire car. You could watch the body flex under acceleration, the doors would jam from the chassis twist. But the real issue was the chassis. It was a C4 Corvette from 1988. It was designed for 300 horsepower, not 900. The suspension couldn't cope. The rear would squat so hard the front tires would barely touch the ground. The steering would go light, then lighter, then non-existent. You were essentially a passenger at that point. The brakes were stock Corvette units. They were adequate for 300 horsepower. For 900, they were a suggestion at best. The aerodynamics were modified but still basically 1980s GM, which means they generated lift. At 200 miles per hour, the front end was floating, the steering became decorative. Minor corrections would send the car into tank slappers that required both skill and luck to catch. The tires were the best available in 1988, which means they were terrible by modern standards. They'd overheat and chunk apart at sustained high speeds. Callaway recommended replacing them every 1,000 miles of normal driving. The interior was stock Corvette with some extra gauges. The seats weren't designed for 200-mile-per-hour impacts, neither was anything else. The digital dash would flicker and reset randomly, usually while you were trying to see how fast you were going. The air conditioning couldn't keep up with the engine heat. The transmission tunnel would reach pizza oven temperatures. The manual transmission required gorilla strength to shift under power. Miss a shift at full throttle, and the engine would explode, literally. Only one sledgehammer was built. It still exists, rarely driven in a private collection. The owner reportedly hasn't exceeded 100 miles per hour in it. Smart man. Number 1. The TVR Cerbera Speed 12. Yes, technically TVR was British, but the Speed 12 was sold in America, so it counts. And it deserves the number 1 spot because this wasn't just difficult to drive. It was impossible. The Speed 12 started as a racing project, then TVR's mad genius owner Peter Wheeler decided to make it street legal. The engine was 2 inline sixes joined at the crank, 7.7 liters. Naturally aspirated. The dyno couldn't measure its full power, it broke the dyno at 800 horsepower. Engineers estimated it made over 1,000. The development driver, Peter Wheeler himself, took one home for a weekend. He returned it Monday morning and canceled the project. His exact words were, "It's too much." This from a man who daily drove 800 horsepower TVRs. The Speed 12 wasn't just powerful, it was unusable. The clutch was an on-off switch that required both legs to depress. The gearbox was agricultural. The throws were measured in yards. The engine idle sounded like artillery fire. It would literally shake buildings. The chassis was designed for maybe 500 horsepower. It had double that. Plus, the result was catastrophic. The car would wheelie on the street without trying. The torque would twist the chassis so badly the doors wouldn't open after hard acceleration. The fiberglass body would crack from the stress. The rear tires, massive 345 section racing slicks, would spin at any speed in any gear. First through fourth were essentially the same gear, wheel spin. Fifth gear at 100 miles per hour, still spinning. The weight distribution was approximately 100% wrong. All the weight was in the front where that massive engine lived. The rear was just along for the ride. Until it wasn't. The car would oversteer without warning, violently. The steering was unassisted and heavier than a forklift's. But when the rear stepped out, not if, when, it was also too slow. You'd correct the mass of that enormous engine would pendulum, and you'd spin the other way. Professional racing drivers couldn't handle it. One test driver said it was undrivable on the track. The street, forget it. TVR only built one customer car. The owner uses it exclusively for shows. He's never driven it. On the street. The car has less than 100 miles on it. It's essentially a static display that occasionally gets started to scare people. Wheeler was right to cancel it. The Speed 12 wasn't a car. It was a lawsuit waiting to happen. It remains the most powerful, most terrifying, and most undrivable car ever offered for sale in America. It's the automotive equivalent of a nuclear weapon. Theoretically usable, but practically, you'd be insane to try. And there you have it, 10 American cars, okay, 9 American and 1 Anglo-American monster, that are so ridiculously difficult to drive, they make a learning stick shift look like child's play. Each one of these machines represents ambition exceeding sanity, where, because we can, overwrote, but should we? Did you ever have a white-knuckle experience with any of these automotive nightmares? Or do you know of another car that deserves a spot on this list? Drop your stories in the comments below. Misery loves company, especially when it comes with 4 wheels and a warranty violation. If you enjoyed this countdown of 4-wheel terror, smash that like button and subscribe for more automotive insanity. Until next time, keep it between the ditches, if you can. Ever wondered which American V8s make mechanics run for the hills? You know that sinking feeling when you pop the hood and see that engine staring back at you? The one that makes you question every life decision that led to this moment? Today we're shifting through the most despised, wallet-draining, knuckle-busting V8s ever bolted into American metal. From catastrophic head gaskets to self-destructing timing chains, these are the engines that turned project cars into yard art. Buckle up and hit that subscribe button because we're about to expose the V8s that even die-hard American muscle fans love to hate. Number 10. Cadillac 4.1L HT4100 V8. In 1982, Cadillac decided to reinvent the V8. What they created was the HT4100, high technology, they called it. Owners called it something else entirely. This aluminum block disaster featured cast iron heads, creating the perfect recipe for a head gasket failure. The thermal expansion rates were completely different. Aluminum expands faster than iron, basic physics. Cadillac somehow missed this. The engine produced a pathetic 135 horsepower from 4.1 liters, that's 33 horsepower per liter. A Honda Civic from the same era made more power per liter, in a Cadillac, the flagship of American luxury. But weak power wasn't even the main problem. These engines ate head gaskets like candy. The aluminum block would expand, the iron heads wouldn't, and boom. Coolant in the oil, oil in the coolant, white smoke pouring from the exhaust. The intake manifold was another masterpiece of poor engineering. It would crack and leak coolant internally. No external signs, just mysterious coolant loss and overheating. Mechanics learned to check for this first. The repair required pulling the entire top end apart. Labor costs often exceeded the car's value. GM's solution: they told dealers to use special coolant tablets, stop leak pellets. In a luxury car, the tablets would temporarily seal small leaks but clog the radiator and heater core, creating new problems while barely addressing the original issue. Owners started calling them death tablets. The camshaft was driven by a nylon timing chain gear, nylon, in an engine that ran hot due to cooling system problems. The gear would strip teeth around 60,000 miles. When it went, valves met pistons. Interference engine design meant total destruction, bent valves, damaged pistons, scored cylinder walls, a complete rebuild or engine replacement. Oil consumption was legendary. A quart every 500 miles wasn't unusual. The piston rings couldn't handle the aluminum bore expansion. Cylinder wall scoring was inevitable. Blue smoke became the HT4100's signature. Cadillac owners learned to carry cases of oil in their trunks. The engine management system was equally problematic. Early digital fuel injection with primitive sensors. When sensors failed, and they always did, the engine ran in limp mode. Maximum speed of 55, perfect for getting passed by everyone on the highway in your luxury sedan. Today, finding a running HT4100 is nearly impossible. Most were replaced with Oldsmobile 307s or Chevy 350s. The swap was so common that conversion kits became a cottage industry. When owners actively remove your engine and replace it with a competitor's, you know you failed. The HT4100 remains Cadillac's greatest engineering embarrassment, teaching GM that high technology means nothing without basic reliability. Number 9. Ford 6.0L Power Stroke Diesel V8. Ford's 6.0 Power Stroke arrived in 2003 with big promises. More power than the legendary 7.3, better fuel economy, quieter operation. What Ford delivered was the most hated diesel engine in American history. This international-built nightmare turned Super Duty trucks into expensive lawn ornaments. The problem started immediately and never stopped. The EGR cooler was the first domino to fall. It would clog with soot, restricting coolant flow. Coolant temperatures spiked, the cooler would crack internally, dumping coolant into the intake. Hydrolock was common, bent rods, cracked pistons, windowed blocks. A simple emissions component causing catastrophic engine failure. Head gaskets were the next failure point. The TTY head bolts couldn't handle the cylinder pressures. They'd stretch, allowing combustion gases into the cooling system. The coolant reservoir would look like a witch's brew. Bubbling, foaming, overflowing. White smoke would pour from the exhaust. The fix required pulling the cab off the truck. Yes, removing the entire cab. Labor costs started at $4,000. The oil cooler was another masterpiece of poor design. It would clog with debris, restricting oil flow. Oil and coolant would mix, creating chocolate milk in both systems. Bearings would fail from contaminated oil. The engine would self-destruct from the inside out. Ford's solution? Replace it every 50,000 miles. Preventative maintenance on a part that should last the engine's lifetime. Fuel injectors were equally problematic. The HEUI system required high-pressure oil to fire the injectors. When the injectors stuck, they dumped raw fuel into the cylinders. Washed down cylinder walls, diluted the oil, bent rods from hydraulic lock. A single failed injector could destroy the entire engine. Replacement cost? $300 per injector, times 8 plus labor. The variable geometry turbo was revolutionary. And terrible. The vanes would stick from soot buildup. Boost pressure would spike or disappear entirely. Overboost conditions cracked manifolds and blew head gaskets. Underboost left you merging onto highways at bicycle speeds. Cleaning required complete disassembly. Most owners just deleted the entire system. The FICM, fuel injection control module, was mounted on the engine. Electronics. On a vibrating 200-degree engine, they'd cook themselves to death, taking the injector drivers with them. No start conditions were common. The repair required a $900 module that would fail again in 30,000 miles. Ford never relocated it to a cooler location. High-pressure oil pumps would fail without warning. The engine would simply stop running. No oil pressure meant no fuel injection. Stranded owners became the norm. Tow truck drivers knew these trucks by sight. The pump replacement required extensive disassembly and perfect timing alignment. Today, bulletproofing a 6.0 is a massive industry. ARP head studs, upgraded EGR coolers, external oil coolers, FICM relocations. The modifications cost more than many running trucks, but without them, the engine is a ticking time bomb. Forums are filled with horror stories, engines failing at 30,000 miles, multiple rebuilds. Before 100,000, fleet owners switched brands entirely. The 6.0 Power Stroke proved that advanced technology means nothing without basic reliability. It remains the most problematic diesel engine Ford ever sold, turning loyal customers into permanent Dodge and Chevy converts. Number 8. Oldsmobile 350 Diesel V8. In 1978, Oldsmobile had a brilliant idea. Take their gasoline 3i50 V8 and convert it to diesel. How hard could it be? The answer became one of the most catastrophic engine failures in automotive history. This half-baked conversion destroyed GM's diesel reputation for decades. It wasn't designed as a diesel. It was a gas engine pretending to be one, and it failed spectacularly. The block couldn't handle diesel compression ratios. Gas engines run around 9.1 compression, diesels need 22.1. Oldsmobile just increased compression and hoped for the best. The cast iron couldn't take the pressure. Main bearing webs cracked, cylinder walls split, blocks literally broke in half. Catastrophic failure was inevitable, usually before 50,000 miles. Head bolts were the next weak point. GM used the same TTY bolts from the gas engine. They stretched under diesel compression. Head gaskets blew constantly. Coolant mixed with oil, creating a gray sludge. The fix? GM recommended retorquing the head bolts, like tightening already stretched bolts would somehow make them stronger. It didn't work. The fuel injection system was primitive at best. Mechanical injection with no precise control. Injectors would stick open, flooding cylinders with diesel. Hydraulic lock bent rods and cracked pistons. When they stuck closed, cylinders ran lean. Melted pistons were common. The injection pump was equally problematic. It couldn't maintain consistent pressure. Power delivery was erratic. The engine would surge and stumble randomly. Starting these engines in cold weather was nearly impossible. No glow plugs. That's right, GM built a diesel without glow plugs. They relied on compression alone for cold starts. In Minnesota winters, these engines simply wouldn't start. Owners resorted to ether, lots of ether, which cracked rings and damaged pistons, creating more problems while solving none. The harmonic balancer was undersized for diesel vibrations. It would separate, sending the outer ring flying, usually through the hood or into the radiator. The crankshaft, without proper dampening, would develop stress cracks. When it broke, and it always did, the engine was finished. Connecting rods would exit through the block. Oil pans looked like someone attacked them with a sledgehammer. Noise levels were unbearable. GM added extra sound deadening, but it wasn't enough. These engines clattered like a bucket of bolts in a paint shaker. At idle, conversation was impossible. Highway cruising was torture. Owners complained of headaches from the constant diesel clatter. Luxury car buyers expected refinement. They got a farm tractor soundtrack instead. Water contamination in the fuel system was another nightmare. The water separator was an afterthought. Water would pass through to the injection pump. Corrosion destroyed the precisely machined components. The pump would seize, taking the engine with it. Repair costs often exceeded the car's value. Many were simply scrapped. The damage to GM's reputation was immense. Buyers who suffered through these disasters never bought another GM diesel, or another GM product period. Class action lawsuits followed. GM eventually offered to replace the diesel engines with gas V8s at their expense. It cost millions. The Oldsmobile Diesel V8 proved that you can't simply convert a gas engine to diesel. Physics doesn't work that way. It remains the worst diesel engine ever sold in America, single-handedly killing the passenger car diesel market for GM. Even today, mention Oldsmobile diesel to anyone who owned one. Watch their face. The trauma is still real. Number 7. Chrysler 2.7L DOHC V6. Wait, this is supposed to be about V8s, right? Well, Chrysler's 2.7L V6 earned its spot here through sheer mechanical hatred. This engine was so universally despised that we're making an exception. Because when an engine is nicknamed the Sludge Monster and the Wallet Destroyer, it deserves recognition. This over-complex nightmare made even hardened Mopar fans switch to imports. The timing chain system was a Rube Goldberg machine. 3 chains, 4 guides, 2 tensioners, all hidden behind the front cover. When the guides wore out, and they always did around 60,000 miles, the chains would jump. Valves met pistons in a catastrophic ballet. The interference design meant total destruction. Bent valves, damaged pistons, scored cylinders. The repair, engine out, complete teardown. Labor alone exceeded most cars' value. Oil sludge was the 2.7's calling card. The internal water pump leaked coolant into the oil. Just a few drops at first. Undetectable. The coolant mixed with oil, creating a thick mayonnaise. This sludge blocked oil passages, starved bearings, seized camshafts. The engine would literally suffocate on its own contaminated oil. Oil changes every 3,000 miles barely helped. The water pump location was criminally stupid. Inside the engine, behind the timing cover. When it failed, coolant went directly into the oil pan. No external leak to warn you, just sudden catastrophic contamination. The repair required complete engine disassembly. A $50 water pump became a $3,000 job. Many engines were destroyed before owners even knew there was a problem. PCV system design was equally flawed. It couldn't handle the blow-by from worn rings. Pressure built up in the crankcase. Oil pushed past every seal. Valve covers, oil pan, front seal, rear main. These engines leaked from everywhere. Parking spots looked like the Exxon Valdez aftermath. The fix required constant seal replacement, fighting a losing battle against poor design. The aluminum heads warped if you looked at them wrong. Any overheating, even minor, resulted in warped heads. Blown head gaskets followed. The repair required machining or replacement, but the block would often be damaged too. Sleeve drops were common, making the entire engine unrepairable. A minor overheat became a death sentence. Rod bearing failure was inevitable. The bearings were undersized for the engine's power. They'd spin, blocking oil passages. Knocking sounds started subtle, then became sledgehammer, loud. When they let go, rods exited through the block. Catastrophic failure was spectacular. Oil and parts everywhere. These engines turned engine bays into crime scenes. Chrysler's response to the problems was denial. They blamed owners for poor maintenance, extended oil changes, wrong oil type. Anything but admitting the design was fundamentally flawed. Warranties were denied. Customers were left with dead engines and massive bills. The lawsuits were inevitable and justified. Today, cars with 2.7L engines are essentially worthless. The engine's reputation destroyed resale values. Intrepids, Concords, Sebrings all became mechanical pariahs. Junkyards are full of them, low-mileage examples with blown engines. The smart money walked away, far away. While technically not a V8, the 2.7L V6 earned its place on this list through pure mechanical malevolence. It remains Chrysler's most hated engine, proof that complexity without reliability equals disaster. Number 6. Cadillac Northstar a V8. The Northstar V8 was supposed to be Cadillac's technological masterpiece. Dual overhead cams, 32 valves, aluminum everything, 300 horsepower from 4.6 liters. It was going to battle the Germans and Japanese. What Cadillac delivered was an overcomplicated nightmare that ate head gaskets for breakfast and destroyed the brand's reputation for reliability. The head bolt threads were the fatal flaw. Aluminum block, steel head bolts, different expansion rates. The threads would pull out of the block under normal operation, not abuse, just regular driving. The head bolts would lose torque, head gaskets would fail. Coolant in the oil, oil in the coolant, the classic milkshake of death. The fix? Thread inserts. But accessing the rear bolts required dropping the engine, or removing the transmission. A $300 gasket became a $3,000 nightmare. The starter motor location was pure sadism, under the intake manifold. In the valley of the engine, when it failed and the heat ensured it would, you had two choices: drop the engine or remove the intake. Either way, it was a 10-hour job for a starter. The heat would cook the starter every 40,000 miles. Owners kept spare starters like spare tires. Oil consumption was legendary. A quart every 1,000 miles was considered normal. Normal. The piston rings couldn't seal properly. Carbon buildup made it worse. Blue smoke became the North Star's signature. Following a North Star-powered Cadillac was like following a mosquito fogger. The catalytic converters would clog from oil consumption, creating back pressure, making the problem worse. The cooling system was unnecessarily complex: 2 thermostats, crossover pipes, purge lines. Air pockets were inevitable. Even experienced mechanics struggled to bleed the system properly. Air pockets caused hot spots warped heads blew gaskets. The cycle of destruction continued. Many engines died from simple coolant changes gone wrong. Carbon buildup was severe. Direct injection wasn't available yet, so port injection washed less carbon from valves. The secondary air injection ports would clog, setting off check engine lights. The EGR passages would block completely. More codes, more problems. Cleaning required disassembly. Lots of disassembly. Labor costs mounted quickly. The timing chain tensioners were hydraulic. They'd lose pressure and allow chain slack. The chains would rattle on startup. Sound like a diesel. Eventually they'd jump. Bent valves followed. The interference design showed no mercy. A stretched chain meant a destroyed engine. Replacement required front cover removal. More massive labor costs. Case studies tell the real story. 2000 DeVille, 67,000 miles. Head gasket failure, $3,500 repair. Failed again at 89,000. Owner junked it. 2003 Seville, starter failed at 45,000. Quantum $200 repair. Head gaskets at 72,000. $4,000. Oil consumption throughout. Owner traded for a Lexus, never looked back. GM eventually updated the design, improved head bolts, better gaskets, revised thread pitch. But the damage was done. The North Star's reputation was destroyed. Owners fled to imports. The engine that was supposed to save Cadillac helped kill it. Today, North Star-powered cars are cheap. Very cheap, because everyone knows what's coming. The North Star remains a cautionary tale about complexity without reliability. Number 5. Ford 5.4L Triton 3-valve V8. Ford's 5.4L 3-valve Triton seemed promising on paper. More power than the 2-valve. Variable cam timing. 300 horsepower, 365 lb-ft of torque. What Ford delivered was an engine that turned routine maintenance into nightmare scenarios. This engine single-handedly created an entire industry of specialty tools and repair shops. The problems were so widespread that class action lawsuits followed. The spark plugs were the most infamous failure. Ford used a 2-piece design with an extended ground electrode. The plugs would break during removal. The porcelain would separate from the metal shell, leaving the bottom half seized in the head. Extraction required special tools. Sometimes the head had to be removed. A simple tune-up became a $1,000 gamble. Mechanics charged extra just to attempt plug changes. The cam phasers were equally problematic. These variable timing units would fail internally, creating a diesel-like knocking sound. The noise started on cold starts, eventually became constant. The phasers would stick, throwing off cam timing, power loss, poor fuel economy, check engine lights. The repair required timing cover removal, both phasers, timing chains, tensioners, a $3,000 job if you were lucky. Timing chain guides were made of plastic, in an engine that ran hot. The guides would crack and break, chain slack followed, the chains would slap against the covers. Eventually, they'd jump. Bent valves were guaranteed, the interference design showed no mercy, complete engine rebuild or replacement. Many trucks were totaled by insurance companies. The repair exceeded the vehicle's value. The fuel pump driver module was mounted on the frame. Exposed to road salt, moisture, debris, it would corrode and fail. The engine would stumble, stall, refuse to start. The module cost $100, labor was $500 because accessing it required dropping the fuel tank. Ford's solution? Move it to a better location, just kidding. They left it there for the entire production run. Carbon buildup on intake valves was severe. Port injection couldn't keep them clean. The valves would get caked with deposits, airflow restricted, misfires followed, cleaning required walnut blasting or manual scraping. The intake had to come off. More massive labor charges, every 60,000 miles. Like clockwork, oil consumption plagued higher mileage engines. The rings would wear, valve seals would fail. A quart every 1,000 miles became normal. The catalytic converters would clog from oil burning, creating back pressure, making consumption worse. Eventually, rod bearings would fail from oil starvation. Catastrophic. Failure followed. The VCT solenoids would fail from contaminated oil. Sludge buildup was common. The solenoids would stick. Cam timing would be off. Rough idle. Power loss. More check engine lights. Replacement was straightforward, if you could reach them. which you couldn't. More disassembly required. Real-world horror stories are everywhere. 2004 F-150, 80,000 miles, spark plug change attempted, 3 plugs broke, extraction failed, head removal required. 2500 2006 Expedition, cam phaser knock at 70,000, ignored it. Timing chain jumped at 85,000, engine destroyed, $6,000 replacement. 2008 Navigator fuel pump driver failed 3 times. Owner gave up, traded for a Chevy. The 5.4L 3-valve proved that more technology isn't always better. Variable cam timing. Advanced combustion chambers, complex engineering, all defeated by basic design flaws, plastic guides, 2-piece plugs, poor component locations. The engine that powered millions of F-150s became their biggest liability. Forums are filled with prevention strategies: change plugs early, replace phasers preventatively, use only motorcraft oil. Fighting a losing battle against poor design. The 5.4L 3-valve remains Ford's most problematic modern V8, a reminder that even simple maintenance shouldn't require special tools and prayer. Number 4. GM 8.1L Vortec Big Block. V8 GM's 8.1L Vortec was the last traditional big block. 496 cubic inches of old-school displacement. It should have been bulletproof. Simple pushrod design, proven architecture. What it GM delivered was a fuel-guzzling nightmare with appetite for destruction. And this monster didn't just drink gas, it consumed engines from the inside out. The connecting rods were the weakest link. Powdered metal construction, cost-cutting at its finest. They'd crack under load. Not abuse, just normal towing. The rods would let go around 100,000 miles, sometimes sooner. When they failed, they exited through the block. Violently, oil everywhere, block destroyed, crankshaft ruined, complete engine replacement required. No rebuilding a windowed block. Piston slap was endemic. The pistons rocked in their bores when cold. Sounded like someone hammering inside the engine. GM called it normal. Owners called it unacceptable. The slap would worsen with mileage. Eventually the skirts would crack. Broken pistons followed. More catastrophic failure. The fix? GM had none. Live with it or replace the engine. Oil consumption was measured in gallons, not quarts. 2 quarts every 1,000 miles was common. The valve seals would fail early, guides would wear, blue smoke poured from the exhaust. The PCV system couldn't handle the blow-by. Oil pushed past every seal. These engines marked their territory everywhere they parked. The intake manifold gaskets were a persistent problem. The plastic gaskets would fail, coolant would leak externally and internally into the intake ports. Hydrolock was possible. The gaskets cost $50, labor was $800, because the massive intake required everything on top to be removed. Alternator, AC compressor, every bracket, a full day's labor for gaskets. Fuel economy was abysmal, even for a big block. 8 mpg city, 12 highway, if you were lucky. Towing dropped it to 6 mpg. The 42-gallon tank provided a mere 250-mile range. Gas station owners loved these trucks. Owners' wallets didn't. $150 fill-ups were common. Before gas hit $4 a gallon, the knock sensors would fail constantly. Heat and vibration killed them. The engine would pull timing. Power dropped dramatically. Fuel economy got even worse. Replacement required intake manifold removal again. More labor costs. The sensors would fail again in 30,000 miles. A never-ending cycle. Crankshaft position sensor failures were sudden and complete. The engine would die without warning. No restart, usually in traffic, or while towing. The sensor was buried behind the starter, which was behind the exhaust. Everything had to come apart. A $30 sensor became a $500 repair. The engine's weight created its own problems. 725 pounds dry, it destroyed front suspensions, ball joints, tie rods, control arm bushings. Everything wore prematurely. The frame would crack at the engine mounts, especially in plow trucks. The engine was literally too heavy for the chassis. Real owners tell the truth. 2001 Sierra 2500 HD, rod failure at 89,000 miles, engine destroyed, $5,000 replacement. 2003 Suburban 2500, oil consumption from day one, GM denied warranty, 3 quarts every 1,000 miles, traded at 50,000 miles. 2004 Avalanche 2500, intake gaskets, knock sensors, crank sensor, all before 70,000 miles. Owner switched to diesel. The 8.1L Vortec proved that bigger isn't always better. It was thirsty, unreliable, and expensive to maintain. The last big block became a testament to cost-cutting and poor engineering. Owners either accepted massive fuel and repair bills or moved on. Most moved on. Today, 8.0L trucks are hard to sell. Everyone knows the problems. The engine that should have been GM's heavy-duty hero became its biggest liability. It remains the most problematic big block GM ever produced. Number 3. Chrysler 5.7L Hemi 2003-2008. Early generation. The modern Hemi was supposed to resurrect Chrysler's muscle car glory. That legendary name, that marketing power, that thing got a Hemi became a cultural phenomenon. What early buyers got was an engine with more problems than cylinders. The 2003-2008 5.7L Hemi turned Ram trucks and Chargers into expensive paperweights. The issues were so widespread that the Hemi name itself became a warning. The valve seats would drop without warning. The pressed-in seats would simply fall out of the heads into the combustion chamber. Valve followed seat. Piston met valve. Catastrophic destruction followed. Bent valves, hold pistons, scored cylinders, destroyed heads. The repair? New heads. Sometimes new engine. The failure was random, could happen at 30,000 miles or 130,000. Russian roulette under the hood. The lifters were the Hemi's Achilles heel. The MDS multi-displacement system lifters would fail constantly. They'd collapse, stick, refuse to pump up. The cam lobes would wipe out. Metal shavings circulated through the engine, destroying bearings, scoring journals. The distinctive Hemi tick became the sound of impending doom. Repair required complete valve train replacement, cam, lifters, push rods. Often too late, the damage was done. The infamous Hemi tick had multiple causes: broken valve springs, failed lifters, worn rocker arms, exhaust manifold bolts breaking. Sometimes all at once, the tick would start subtle, gradually worsen. Owners learned to fear the sound. It meant expensive repairs were coming. Forums filled with tick of death posts, videos of the sound.
Look at this. And you're going. Whew.
Desperate searches for solutions. Oil consumption was excessive. The cylinder deactivation system made it worse. Rings would stick, cylinders would score. A quart every 1,000 miles became normal. The cats would clog from oil burning, creating back pressure, making consumption worse. The PCV system couldn't handle the blow-by. Oil pushed past seals, leaks everywhere. The timing chain tensioner was hydraulic. It would lose pressure, allow chain slack. The chain would slap against the cover, eventually jump timing. Bent valves in this interference engine. More catastrophic failure. The tensioner was cheap, labor wasn't. Everything had to come apart. Radiator, accessories, front cover. A $50 part became a sour $300 job. Exhaust manifold bolts were criminally underdesigned. They'd break, all of them. The rear bolts were impossible to reach. Extraction often failed. Heads had to be removed, drilled, retapped. The manifolds would warp from heat cycles, creating exhaust leaks. The ticking sound drove owners insane. The repair was temporary. Bolts would break again. The MDS system was a complete disaster, designed to shut off 4 cylinders for fuel economy. It created more problems than it solved. Lifters failed. Oil consumption increased. Vibrations at cruise. Droning exhaust note. The fuel savings were minimal. Maybe one Maypad Cower TD. The repair costs were massive. Most owners disabled it if they could afford to. Real-world failures tell the story. 2005 Ram 1500, 67,000 miles, dropped valve seat, engine destroyed. $5,500 replacement. 2006 Charger RT, lifter failure at 45,000, cam wiped. Complete valve train, 3,000. Hemi tick throughout. 2007 Grand Cherokee, oil consumption from new, dealer said normal, traded at 40,000 miles. Too many issues. The early 5.7L Hemi damaged Chrysler's reputation severely. The legendary name became associated with failure, not performance. Owners fled to Ford and GM, or imports. The forums are graveyards of horror stories. Failed engines, massive repair bills, broken dreams. Chrysler eventually addressed some issues. Improved valve seats, better lifters, revised MDS, but the damage was done. The early Hemi remains one of the most problematic modern V8s. That marketing tagline became a warning. That thing got a Hemi? Yeah, run away. Number 2. Chevrolet 305 small block V8. The Chevrolet 305 is hated for different reasons than mechanical failure. This engine represents everything wrong with the malaise era. Underpowered, inefficient, strangled by emissions. The 305 took the legendary small block formula and neutered it. This wasn't just a bad engine, it was an insult to everything Chevrolet performance stood for. The power output was pathetic, 150 horsepower from 5.0 liters, that's 30 horsepower per liter. A modern Prius makes more power per liter. In the 1980s, Corvettes made 180 horsepower. Corvettes, America's sports car. Powered by this wheezing disappointment, the L69HO version made 190 horsepower. High output, 190, let that sink in. The bore-stroke ratio was terrible. 3.736-inch bore, 3.48-inch stroke. The small bores shrouded the valves, killed breathing, limited valve size, made performance modifications nearly impossible, you couldn't bore it out much. The cylinder walls were too thin. Unlike the 350, which could be built into a monster, the 305 was forever handicapped. The smog equipment was dystopian: air pumps, EGR valves, catalytic converters, computer-controlled carburetors that never worked right, vacuum lines everywhere, like spaghetti. The engines ran hot, pinged constantly, made no power. The computer controls were primitive. Sensors failed constantly, the engine would run terribly, or not at all. The cylinder heads were garbage. Small valves, tiny ports, designed for emissions, not performance. The combustion chambers were enormous. Compression ratios around 8.5.1. Even with premium gas, they made no power. Swapping heads helped. But why bother? Start with a 350. Same external dimensions, infinitely better potential. The cam profiles were laughable. Designed for idle quality and emissions, not power. Lift measured in millimeters. Duration shorter than a sneeze. The engines had no top end. Power peaked at 4,000 odd RPM. By 4,500 it was over. The sound was depressing, not the healthy rumble of a proper V8, more like an asthmatic wheeze. Build quality was inconsistent. Some ran forever making no power, others self-destructed early. Soft cams were common, worn lobes by 50,000 miles. The timing chains would stretch, retarded timing made bad power worse, main bearings would wear, low oil pressure followed. These weren't catastrophic failures, just slow, depressing decline. The 305 powered everything in the 1980s: Camaros, Firebirds, Monte Carlos, trucks, vans, all disappointingly slow. A 1985 Camaro Z28 ran 16-second quarter miles. Bone stock, modern minivans are faster. The 305 made every vehicle it touched worse, heavier than a V6, less powerful than a modern 4-cylinder. The aftermarket gave up on the 305, why modify it? The 350 was the same size, made real power, had potential. The 305 was a dead end. Enthusiasts learned to avoid it. The first modification was always replacement. With anything else, even a 307 Oldsmobile was better. At least it had torque. Today, 305s are worthless. Nobody wants them. They're boat anchors. Core value only. The hatred is universal. Not because they're unreliable, they'll run badly forever, but because they represent surrender. GM gave up, built an engine designed to meet regulations, not excite drivers. The 305 remains the most hated small block Chevy ever built. A reminder that displacement means nothing without breathing, and that the malaise era nearly killed American performance. Number 1. Ford 6.4L Power Stroke Diesel V8. The 6.4L Power Stroke wasn't just bad, it was apocalyptically terrible. This international-built disaster made the problematic 6.0L look reliable. Ford learned nothing from the 6.0's failures. They doubled down on complexity, added more emissions equipment, created the most unreliable, expensive-to-maintain diesel engine in American history. This engine didn't just fail. It failed catastrophically, repeatedly, and expensively. The DPF diesel particulate filter system was the first horseman of the apocalypse. It would clog constantly, require regeneration cycles, dump raw fuel into the cylinders to burn out soot. This fuel washed down cylinder walls, diluted the oil, destroyed bearings, scored cylinders. The regeneration cycles happened every few hundred miles. Fuel economy plummeted, oil turned to diesel soup, engine death followed. The fuel system was impossibly complex, too high pressure. Fuel pumps, too low pressure pumps. When the high pressure pumps failed, and they always did, they sent metal shavings throughout the system. Every injector contaminated, fuel rails destroyed, complete fuel system replacement required. Cost $10,000. Yes, $10,000. For a fuel system on a truck worth maybe $15,000. The pistons cracked constantly. The increased cylinder pressures from emissions tuning stressed them beyond limits. Cracks started at the fuel bowl, progressed across the crown, pieces would break off, destroy the cylinder, melt valves. The failure was inevitable, not if, when. Usually between 100,000, 150,000 miles. Complete engine replacement required, no rebuilding cracked pistons, radiators failed like clockwork, the plastic end tanks would crack, leak, overheat the engine. But here's the kicker. The radiator was a dual-core design, primary and secondary cooling. When the primary failed, the secondary couldn't handle the load. Overheating was instant, head gaskets blown, heads warped, the radiator cost $800, labor was another $800, and it would fail again in 30,000 miles. The turbochargers were sequential twin units, complex, expensive, fragile. The variable vanes would stick from soot, turbos would overboost, or underboost, usually both. The shaft seals would fail. Oil consumption through the turbos, blue smoke everywhere. Replacement turbos cost $2,500 each. Labor added another $2,000, $4,000 for turbos that would fail again. Head gaskets were a when not if proposition. The increased cylinder pressures, the constant heat cycles from DPF regeneration, the head bolts couldn't handle it, they'd stretch, gaskets would fail. But unlike the 6.0, the 6.4 would often crack heads too. Not just gasket failure, cracked heads, unrepairable. New heads cost $3,000 plus labor, plus whatever else broke. Oil dilution from DPF regeneration was severe. The oil would smell like diesel because it was mostly diesel. Viscosity destroyed, lubrication properties gone, bearings would fail, spin, block the oil passages, rod knocks followed. Then catastrophic failure. Oil changes every 3,000 miles barely helped. The damage was continuous. The EGR coolers failed just like the 6.0, but Ford added 2 of them, double the failure points. When they cracked, coolant entered the intake. Hydrolock, bent rods, hold pistons. The upgraded coolers still failed, just took slightly longer. The delete kits became mandatory for survival, but voided warranties, catch-22, real-world horror stories are legendary. 2008, F250, 47,000 miles, high-pressure fuel pump failure, metal throughout system, 10,000 to repair, traded immediately. 2009 F350, cracked pistons at 95,000, engine replacement, $15,000, sold at massive loss. 2010 F450, head gaskets, turbos, fuel system, EGR coolers, all before 100,000 miles, $25,000 in repairs, owner sued Ford, lost. The 6.4L Power Stroke killed Ford's diesel reputation completely. Fleet owners abandoned Ford entirely, resale values plummeted, these trucks became radioactive, nobody wanted them. Even at bargain prices, the repair costs exceeded most truck values. Insurance companies totaled them for minor failures. The engine was so bad Ford fired International, developed the 6.7L in-house, the admission of failure, forums dedicated to 6.4L problems exploded, delete strategies, bulletproofing guides, failure prevention, all futile. The engine was fundamentally flawed, unfixable. The only solution was removal, complete deletion, replace with anything else. The 6.4L Power Stroke remains the worst diesel engine ever sold in America, possibly the worst engine period. It destroyed fortunes, ruined businesses, ended friendships, the king of hated American V8s, long may it stay dead. That's our countdown of the 10 most despised V8s ever to disgrace American engine bays. From head gasket eating Cadillacs to wallet destroying Power Strokes, these engines prove that even America can build mechanical nightmares. Which one of these disasters have you suffered through? Drop your horror stories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more automotive truth bombs. Hit that notification bell, because next week we're diving into the best V8 engine swaps that'll make you forget these disasters ever existed. Until then, keep those tools handy and those credit cards hidden.